In a quiet suburb of Ohio, where the trees whispered secrets and the sun dipped lazily behind the horizon, there lived a man named John. He was the kind of man who wore his heart on his sleeve, a gentle soul who believed in love, loyalty, and the sanctity of marriage. For 20 years, he had shared his life with Brenda, the woman he had met in college, whose laughter had once filled their home with warmth and joy. Together, they had built a life filled with dreams, 2 children who were their pride and joy, and a home that was a testament to their shared years of love and commitment. But as the seasons changed, so too did the winds of fortune. John began to notice small changes in Brenda's demeanor. A late night at work here, a sudden interest in her appearance there. He brushed off his suspicions, convincing himself that after 2 decades, it was normal for couples to drift a bit. Yet, deep down, an unsettling feeling gnawed at him. A whisper that perhaps all was not as it seemed. One fateful evening, the truth shattered the fragile peace of their lives. John returned home early, eager to surprise Brenda with a romantic dinner. As he approached the house, he noticed the flickering light of the television spilling from the living room window. Curiously peering inside, his heart sank. There, on the couch, was Brenda, entwined in the arms of another man, laughter bubbling from her lips, a sound that had once been reserved for him alone. John felt as though the ground had fallen away beneath him, the air thickening into an agonizing silence. His legs felt heavy as he stepped back, retreating into the shadows, his mind racing with disbelief and anger. How could she, the woman he had trusted with his heart, had betrayed him in the most unforgivable way? Overwhelmed by a rush of emotions, hurt, rage, and a bitter sense of betrayal, he knew he could not confront her just yet. He needed time to think, to plan his next move. The days that followed were a blur of anguish and introspection. John found himself oscillating between despair and a simmering anger that demanded justice. He shared his heartache with a close friend, Mike, who had been through a similar ordeal. Mike reminded him that while betrayal was painful, it could also be a catalyst for change, a chance to reclaim his dignity and self-worth. With a renewed sense of purpose, John began to devise a plan. He knew he had to gather evidence of Brenda's infidelity, not for revenge alone, but to confront her with undeniable proof of her betrayal. He installed a discreet security camera in their living room, capturing moments that would reveal the truth to him, should he ever need it. Each time he reviewed the footage, his heart sank further into despair, but it also fueled a fire within him, a determination to rise from the ashes of his shattered trust. Weeks passed, and John's resolve hardened. He began to distance himself from Brenda, spending more time at work and with friends, slowly reclaiming his life piece by piece. The children were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface, and John was determined to protect them from the fallout of their mother's actions for as long as possible. Then came the day when John's plan took a decisive turn. He decided to confront Brenda, armed with the evidence of her betrayal. He gathered the children and organized a family dinner, a facade of normalcy masking the storm that was about to break. As the meal concluded, John felt the weight of his heart in his throat. He turned to Brenda, his voice steady, but his heart racing. "Brenda, we need to talk," he said, a calmness that belied the turmoil within. With the children distracted, he revealed the footage, watching as her face drained of color. The laughter that had once been so vibrant turned to silence as the reality of her actions hit her like a tidal wave. It was a moment of reckoning, one that felt both surreal and empowering. He had finally taken control of the narrative, confronting the betrayal head-on. Brenda's tears flowed freely, but John felt no sympathy. He had long since learned that tears could mask guilt, and he wasn't about to fall for that trap. Instead, he laid bare his feelings, expressing the deep hurt her betrayal had caused. He told her how her actions had not only shattered their marriage, but also the trust and faith their children had in their family. As the confrontation unfolded, John felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. He had taken the first step toward reclaiming his dignity, a step that would set the course of his life anew. But as he watched Brenda crumble under the weight of her guilt, doubts began to creep in. Was he being too harsh? Would he regret this moment later? But anger and betrayal had a way of clouding judgment. As the dust settled, John was left with a choice: to forgive, to forget, or to seek a form of retribution that would not only serve as justice, but also as a lesson for Brenda. He knew he had to tread carefully, not just for himself, but for his children, who were at the center of this storm. And so, John found himself at a crossroads. He could continue down the path of anger and revenge, or he could choose a more measured approach, one that would ensure his dignity remained intact and serve as a warning to Brenda, a reminder of the consequences of betrayal. With this choice looming over him, John felt the weight of his decision pressing down on his shoulders, knowing that whatever path he chose would forever alter the course of their lives. In a quiet suburb, where white picket fences lined the streets and the scent of freshly cut grass wafted through the air, there lived a man named Harold. At 62, Harold was a hard-working, dedicated husband who had spent the better part of his life building a stable home for his family. He was the kind of man who believed in loyalty, who took pride in providing for his wife, Linda, and their 2 children. Theirs was a life that appeared idyllic to those who looked in from the outside. Dinner parties with neighbors, family outings, and holiday celebrations filled with laughter. However, beneath the surface of this, she began to spend more time away from home, citing work commitments or the need for a little personal time. Harold, ever the understanding husband, dismissed his growing unease as the stress of life taking its toll on Linda. He believed in giving her space, trusting that their bond was strong enough to withstand any storm. It was during one of those quiet evenings, while Harold sat in his favorite armchair reading a book, that the storm finally broke. The doorbell rang, and when Harold answered, he was met not by a neighbor, but by a man whose presence was as unsettling as a winter chill. The man introduced himself as Gary, a colleague of Linda's. Harold felt a knot tighten in his stomach as Gary's eyes darted around the entryway, clearly searching for Linda. "Is Linda home?" Gary asked, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "She's out with friends," Harold replied, a sense of foreboding washing over him. "Can I take a message?" Gary hesitated, then said, "It's a bit personal." Harold felt his heart race. Something wasn't right. As Gary stood there, Harold's mind raced through a myriad of possibilities, each one more concerning than the last. "Look, I don't want to intrude, but I think you should know that Linda and I have been seeing each other," Gary finally blurted out. The world around Harold faded away. The book slipped from his lap, falling to the floor with a heavy thud, a sound that echoed the crashing of his heart. Betrayal washed over him like ice water, numbing his senses. "What do you mean, seeing each other?" Harold's voice trembled, barely above a whisper. Gary shifted uncomfortably on his feet, the weight of his confession pressing down on him. "I didn't want to hurt you, but it's been going on for several months now. Linda loves me." Harold felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. This man, standing before him, was not just a stranger. He was the embodiment of everything that had been stolen from him. His heart raced as anger bubbled up, mixed with disbelief and sadness. "You need to leave," he managed to say, his voice steadier than he felt. Gary nodded, relief flashing across his face as he turned to walk away. But as he reached the door, Harold called after him. "You think you can just waltz in here and take what's mine? You're a coward." Gary paused, but then stepped outside, leaving Harold standing in the doorway, his world shattered. With each passing second, the reality of Linda's betrayal sunk deeper into his bones. How could she do this? How could she destroy everything they had built together? As the sun set, casting a golden hue across the neighborhood, Harold felt a fire ignite within him. He wasn't a man to be trifled with. And while he had always believed in forgiveness, this was a different situation. This was a violation of their vows, an affront to everything he held sacred. He would find a way to reclaim his dignity, to ensure that both Linda and Gary understood the consequences of their actions. In the days that followed, the facade of normalcy cracked, revealing the raw emotional turmoil beneath. Harold confronted Linda with the truth, her shocked expression only deepening his resolve. She tried to deny it at first, but when presented with undeniable evidence, her defenses crumbled. The tears flowed, but they were too late to change the reality of her betrayal. "I love him, Harold. I can't go back," she said, her voice cracking. "Then you've made your choice," he replied, his heart heavy but resolute. As Linda moved out, Harold felt a mixture of anger and sadness. He spent sleepless nights plotting his next move. He knew he had to make her understand the pain she had caused, not just to him, but to their family. He began to gather evidence, documenting every moment that would expose the depth of her betrayal. But revenge, he decided, wouldn't just be about making her feel the sting of loss. It would be about reclaiming his own life. As he moved forward, he began to rediscover the passions he had set aside for so long. His love for painting, for woodworking, for spending time with his children. With each passing day, the fire within him transformed from one of anger to one of empowerment. As Harold plotted his course of action, he knew that a reckoning was coming. Linda and Gary would soon learn that betrayal was a double-edged sword, and he was ready to wield it. Little did they know, the man they had underestimated was just getting started on his journey of reclamation and retribution. He became a man on a mission, ready to confront the betrayal with a clarity that came from the depths of his heart. The once quiet man now had a voice, and it was time to make it heard. Harold, heart still heavy with the weight of Linda's betrayal, began to reconstruct his life, piece by piece. He dedicated himself to his job as an accountant, poring over numbers with a newfound intensity. The office that once felt mundane now became a sanctuary. Each calculation was a step away from the heartache that had consumed him. As the days turned into weeks, he found solace in the routine of his work, but the emotional turmoil still lingered, whispering reminders of what he had lost. One evening, while cleaning out the clutter in his garage, Harold stumbled upon an old boxing bag. Memories flooded back of his youth spent training at the local gym, the adrenaline of sparring and the camaraderie of friends. It struck him then. He needed an outlet, something to channel the turmoil within. With a fierce determination, Harold dusted off the heavy bag, hung it from the rafters, and threw his first punch. The thud echoed through the empty garage, a sound of defiance against the betrayal he had endured. Day after day, he returned to that bag, each punch a release of pent-up frustration and sorrow. The rhythmic sound of leather striking leather became his new mantra, a way to reclaim his power. And with that power, a plan began to form. Harold began to gather evidence of Linda's infidelity, not out of malice, but to reclaim his dignity. He reached out to mutual friends, asking them for their insights, and was surprised to learn that whispers of Linda's affair had begun to circulate within their social circle. It seemed he was not the only one who had been deceived. He documented every conversation, every instance of betrayal, ensuring that he had a clear account of the truth. His children, now grown, remained unaware of the depths of their mother's betrayal. Harold didn't want them to suffer through the fallout of Linda's choices, but he also knew that the truth must eventually be revealed. He began to craft a letter, one that would lay bare the reality of what their mother had done. He wanted them to hear it from him, not through the grapevine of gossip. Meanwhile, Linda and Gary seemed to flaunt their relationship in public, and it stung Harold to see photographs of them together, smiling as if their love story had no consequences. This fueled his resolve. He decided that he wouldn't just expose Linda's betrayal. He would also show her the impact of her choices. One day, during a family gathering at a local park, Harold took a deep breath. His heart raced as he approached his children, who were sharing a laugh, unaware of the storm brewing within him. "Can I have everyone's attention for a moment?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with emotion. As they turned to face him, he unfolded the letter he had written. "There's something important I need to share with you all," he began, detailing the truth of Linda's affair and the impact it had on their family. The silence that followed was palpable, filled with shock and disbelief. His daughter, Mia, looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Dad, are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I wish it weren't true, but it is," he replied, his heart aching for the pain he was causing them. I want you both to know that this isn't your fault. Your mother made choices that hurt our family, and I want you to understand the truth." As he spoke, he could see the realization dawning on their faces. They were grappling with the betrayal of someone they had loved and trusted. Harold felt a flicker of hope that by sharing the truth, he could help his children heal and possibly rebuild their family's bond, even if it meant confronting the discomfort of their mother's actions. In the days that followed, Harold's children sought to understand the situation. They reached out to their mother, who responded with defensiveness and anger. "You shouldn't listen to your father," she exclaimed during one heated exchange. "He's just itter." But Mia and Ethan, newly armed with the truth, stood firm. "Mom, we deserve honesty," Ethan said, his voice steady. "You made choices that hurt us. We can't just sweep this under the rug." As the family grappled with the emotional fallout, Harold found strength in their support. He began to rebuild their family's foundation piece by piece, instilling values of honesty, integrity, and respect. The bond between him and his children grew deeper, forged through shared pain and resilience. Meanwhile, as the weeks turned into months, Linda's attempts to reconcile fell flat. She soon realized that Harold had no intention of letting her back into his heart. The more she fought to reclaim her family, the more Harold stood his ground, setting clear boundaries. It became evident that Harold was not merely seeking revenge against Linda, but was focused on creating a life that honored his dignity. He took pride in the man he was becoming, a man who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger. And as he navigated this new chapter, he knew the journey was not just about overcoming Linda's deceit. It was about finding his own path and redefining what happiness meant for him. As he developed new friendships and reconnected with old ones, Harold found himself attending community events where he met a group of men who had faced similar heartaches. They shared stories of betrayal, loss, and ultimately redemption. Harold felt a sense of camaraderie in their experiences, which only fueled his desire to continue his journey of self-discovery. One evening, during a gathering, he overheard a conversation that piqued his interest. A man named Jack spoke passionately about a local charity that helped families affected by infidelity. They provided counseling, legal assistance, and emotional support. Harold felt a spark ignite within him. This was a way he could turn his pain into purpose. He approached Jack after the meeting, eager to learn more. "How can I get involved?" Harold asked, feeling a sense of urgency. Jack smiled, sensing Harold's determination. "We could always use volunteers. There's a training session next week. You'd be perfect for this, given what you've been through." Over the next few months, Harold immersed himself in the charity work. He spoke to individuals and families, sharing his story of betrayal and resilience, while also listening to theirs. Each interaction deepened his understanding of the complexities of relationships and the importance of healing. Through this work, Harold discovered a new purpose in life. He became a beacon of hope for those struggling with similar heartbreaks. He organized community events that focused on healing and rebuilding trust, emphasizing the importance of communication and honesty in relationships. His own experience became a powerful tool for others, guiding them through their darkest moments, while Harold found a new sense of belonging and purpose. Linda continued to grapple with the consequences of her actions. As she realized her marriage was irreparably damaged, she began to reflect on her choices. The glimmer of happiness she had sought with Gary faded, and the emptiness of her decisions began to weigh heavily on her. One day, as she drove through their old neighborhood, memories flooded back. Family dinners, laughter, the warmth of home that she had taken for granted. Linda parked her car outside the old family home, the place where she and Harold had built their lives together. The sight of the house, with its neatly trimmed hedges and the swing set in the yard, stirred a mixture of nostalgia and regret within her. She could see the children's drawings still taped to the windows, remnants of happier times that now felt like a distant memory. That evening, Harold and the children had planned a dinner at their favorite Italian restaurant, a tradition that had been a staple of their family life. As they gathered around the table, Harold couldn't shake the heavy weight of betrayal off his mind, nor the hurt that lingered in Mia and Ethan's eyes. They had been so excited to see their mother, but the reality of her choices hung like a dark cloud over the evening. "Dad, do you think Mom will come?" Mia asked, her voice hopeful yet tinged with uncertainty. Harold glanced at his children, his heart aching. "I don't know, Mia. She's been busy," he replied, the words feeling inadequate to convey the hurt they had all experienced. Ethan, who had been quiet throughout dinner, finally spoke up. "I just don't understand why she would do this to us. Didn't she love us?" The question pierced Harold like a knife, and he felt the sting of tears in his eyes. "Sometimes, love gets complicated, son. People make choices that hurt those they care about the most." The conversation was a reminder of the reality they faced, a reality that was both heartbreaking and sobering. After dinner, as they returned home, Harold felt the need to create a safe space for his children to express their feelings. The family room, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt eerily quiet. "Listen, I know this is hard for all of us," Harold began, looking at Mia and Ethan, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the lamp. "If you want to talk about anything, how you feel, what you think, this is the time." Mia hesitated before speaking. "I just wish things could go back to how they were. I miss Mom." "I miss her too," Harold admitted, his own heart aching. "But we have to be honest about what she did and how it affects us. That's part of healing." Ethan nodded, his expression serious. "I don't want to hate her, but it's hard not to feel angry." "That anger is okay," Harold reassured him. "It's part of what we're going through. But remember, we still have each other. We can get through this together." As the days turned into weeks, Harold's resolve strengthened. He channeled his hurt into his charity work, where he met others who had experienced similar betrayals. Listening to their stories filled him with empathy and reminded him that he wasn't alone. He found solace in sharing his experience, offering support to those who felt lost in the wake of betrayal. Meanwhile, Linda was grappling with her own demons. She had thought the affair would bring her happiness, but it only magnified her loneliness. She missed the sense of belonging she had with Harold and the kids. The thrill of her new relationship faded, leaving her with a profound sense of emptiness. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, Linda stumbled upon a photo of Harold at a charity event, surrounded by smiling faces and children. The sight of him, looking happier than she had seen in months, struck her hard. It was a stark reminder of the life she had willingly walked away from. She felt a pang of jealousy mixed with regret. In the following weeks, Linda attempted to reach out to her children, but they were hesitant to respond. They had chosen to support their father, and the distance grew between them. The holidays approached, and as she decorated her small apartment, the absence of her family weighed heavily on her heart. One evening, driven by a mix of nostalgia and longing, Linda decided to visit the park where they had spent countless weekends. As she walked along the familiar path, memories flooded back: picnics under the trees, laughter echoing in the air, and the warmth of Harold's arm around her. It was then that she saw Harold and the kids. They were playing soccer, their laughter ringing out like music. The sight of them brought a wave of emotions crashing over her. She took a step back, watching from a distance, torn between wanting to join them and feeling unworthy of their joy. Harold caught sight of her from afar, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. He felt a rush of emotions: anger, sadness, and an undeniable flicker of longing. As he approached, he could see the uncertainty in Linda's eyes. "Harold," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Linda," he replied, trying to keep his tone neutral, masking the turmoil inside him. I just wanted to see the kids," she stammered, glancing at Mia and Ethan, who were watching the exchange with wide eyes. "They're busy right now," Harold said, not wanting to expose the children to any unnecessary tension. "And I think they'd like to see you." As Linda hesitated, Harold could feel the weight of their shared history pressing down on him. The anger that had fueled his actions began to wane, replaced by a complicated mixture of hope and fear. Would this be a moment of reconciliation, or would it deepen the rift that had formed between them? "Do you want to grab a coffee? We can talk," he suggested, surprising himself with his own willingness to engage. Linda's eyes widened. "You'd be okay with that?" "I think it's time we talked." As they walked towards the nearby cafe, Harold felt a cautious optimism. He had spent so much time reclaiming his life, finding purpose and joy amidst the chaos. But there was still a part of him that wondered if reconciliation was truly possible. Sitting across from each other, the atmosphere was thick with tension, memories of the past intermingling with the uncertainty of the future. "Harold, I know I've hurt you, hurt all of us," Linda began, her voice trembling. "I can't explain why I made those choices, but I want you to know I'm sorry." Looking into her eyes, Harold saw a glimpse of the woman he had fallen in love with decades ago. "Sorry doesn't change what happened, Linda. You broke our family." "I know, and I've been struggling with that every day," she replied, tears brimming in her eyes. "I miss our life, Harold. I miss you and the kids. I made a terrible mistake." "Do you really understand the impact of your choices?" Harold pressed, his voice steady, but filled with emotion. "I do," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've seen how my actions have hurt our children, and it breaks my heart. I want to make things right." As they talked, Harold felt the cracks in his armor begin to show. Perhaps there was a chance for healing. Outside of work, Harold sought solace in his friends, who rallied around him, offering support and encouragement. They often met for drinks, sharing laughter and stories that reminded Harold of happier times. In the midst of their camaraderie, he found the courage to explore new interests. He signed up for a woodworking class, a hobby he had long desired to pursue but never had the time for. Months passed, and as autumn leaves began to fall, so did some of Harold's lingering anger. He channeled his emotions into crafting beautiful furniture, losing himself in the rhythmic swipes of sandpaper and the intoxicating smell of fresh wood. The workshop became his escape, a place where he could clear his mind and focus on creation rather than destruction. One evening, while sanding a particularly intricate piece, Harold's phone buzzed. It was a message from Linda, asking if they could meet to discuss the kids. He hesitated, but the thought of their children brought him back to the present. He agreed to the meeting, determined to keep things civil for their sake. When they met, Linda appeared more composed, her eyes reflecting a mix of remorse and hope. Their conversation began awkwardly, but gradually shifted to their children's lives, their needs, and how they could co-parent effectively. Throughout the discussion, Harold remained guarded, yet he couldn't ignore the small signs of change in Linda. She seemed genuinely committed to mending the cracks in their family unit. As weeks turned into months, their interactions became more comfortable. They attended school events together, and slowly, their shared laughter began to replace the silence that once hung heavily between them. Harold could see Linda was making an effort, and he admired her for it. However, deep down, Harold couldn't shake the feeling of wanting to reclaim his own life. With the newfound strength he had cultivated, he decided to take a bold step. He began to document his woodworking journey on social media. What started as a personal escape quickly turned into a small following, with people admiring his craftsmanship. Encouraged by the positive feedback, Harold started selling his pieces online. His passion transformed into a side business, providing him a sense of accomplishment he hadn't felt in years. The success of his venture not only brought him joy, but also opened doors to new friendships and opportunities. One evening, after a long day of working on a custom order, he received a message from a local art gallery interested in showcasing his work. Excitement coursed through him as he accepted the offer, thrilled at the chance to share his creations with a larger audience. As the night of the gallery opening approached, he invited Linda to attend, hoping to showcase not just his work, but also the progress they had made as co-parents. To his surprise, she accepted, and a sense of pride swelled within him. The night of the event was a resounding success, with many praising his craftsmanship. Harold stood beside Linda, both of them beaming with pride. In that moment, he realized that while the past would always be a part of them, it didn't have to define their future. After the gallery event, they shared a quiet moment outside, the stars twinkling brightly above them. "You've really found your passion," Linda remarked, her voice warm with admiration. "Thanks to you, I found the strength to pursue it," Harold replied, sincerity lacing his words. As they stood there, Harold felt a sense of closure wash over him. The pain of betrayal had transformed into a catalyst for growth, not just for himself, but for their family. They both understood that while their journey was far from perfect, it was moving forward. With a newfound respect for one another and a commitment to co-parenting, they took the first steps towards a brighter future. In that moment, Harold realized that true revenge wasn't about getting back at Linda, but rather about building a life that he could be proud of, one that honored their shared history while paving the way for new beginnings.